I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Hemmer Time. My guest today, former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. And sir, thank you for your time.
You bet, Bill. Always good to be with you.
You have a wealth of knowledge about threats around the world and here at home. I think in a general sense, where do you direct your attention? Where do you watch?
Yeah, so Bill, what I'd say is, having the unique opportunity to really see more intelligence than anyone in the country for the past year, I've thought about it each day for the past year. And even as I left the position in January, sort of thought, where do we need to be focused now and in the future? And there's really three areas, and it's sort of a, now and then, or short, intermediate term, and then longer term. And as you know, I talk a lot about China, and China is the greatest national security threat as a nation that we need to deal with right now. Cybersecurity is the greatest national security risk or threat that we face, as a nation right now. And then longer term, space. Space is the next frontier that we need to make sure that we dominate, and it controls so much about our lives that down the road, whoever controls space and the rules in space, our national security is very much tied to that when you look at how dependent we are on satellite technology and those kinds of things. So, there's always concerns, on a day-to-day basis about certain terrorist threats in certain places as it comes up around the world. But really from sort of the 10,000-foot view, the things that sort of keep you awake and know that are going to be long-term persistent problems that our country's going to face, that we need to face as a nation to remain the world's dominant superpower. That's where my mind goes to.
Oh, interesting. Let me come back to space in a moment. I always thought the nation that can defend its satellites wins. And that might be 20 or 30 years down the road, but I'll circle back to that. How's Joe Biden doing?
Yeah. Too early to tell. I liked some of the rhetoric that came out early on from some of the folks as they were going through the confirmation process, and sort of tough talk on China. And, and I'll say this, we need Joe Biden and his administration to be successful in the realm of intelligence and national security, or we all suffer. It's easy to get caught up in partisan politics. And having said that, I'm concerned, because the president himself, President Biden, has taken some positions early on particularly with respect to both China and Iran, that frankly, Bill, setting all politics aside, are not supported by our current intelligence and the threat landscape. And things can't have changed that much for some of the policy decisions that he's advocating for. They just don't line up with some of the positions that he's taking. So I'm concerned about that, but like I said, I think it's too early to tell.
Let's go a little deeper on China. You wrote a piece back on the 3rd of December, 2020, which seems so long ago. You wrote China is national security threat number one. You conclude the following way: this generation will be judged by its response to China's effort to reshape the world in its own image and replace America as the dominant superpower. The intelligence is clear. Our response must be as well. Explain.
Yeah. So, the title of this was China is national security threat number one. What I really wanted the title to be was, look, the election's over. Can we all now be honest about China? Because, for the past year, and I don't mean to minimize the threat of Russia, and events like the recent SolarWinds cyber hack really underscores that, Russia is a dangerous adversary. But again, to my point about seeing more intelligence than anyone, it became increasingly clear that as dangerous as Russia can be, they have a very limited toolkit. And the best way to demonstrate that, Bill, is to point out the fact that the United States has the largest economy in the world. China has the second largest economy in the world, and Russia's not in the top 10. In fact, if Texas were a country, and some of us here in Texas think that we should be, the economy of Texas is larger than the economy of Russia. So Russia can only afford to be dangerous in certain places. China is competing with us everywhere, and we just see that. And as I looked at different threat streams of intelligence, whether it were related to economic espionage, whether it related to military power, whether it related to emerging technologies and the things that they were doing with companies like Huawei, China's competing with us everywhere, and are becoming near peer competitors with us in places where there used to be big gaps. And now there's a question whether we're even leading. On some technology issues, China's frankly, shoulder to shoulder with us right now. And that it's very clear what the national strategy is that China is taking. And, if we don't recognize and rise to that, it really is the challenge of this generation. And we won't be the world's greatest superpower if we don't take that seriously. I just want that's where I want the Biden administration to be honest about it. And, and so one of the things, without, getting into it, obviously a lot of the folks that what we're finding out that are in the administration, have worked with China and frankly, have gotten rich doing work with China. And so will they hold China accountable? And that's a question when I say it's too soon to tell. What I really mean is, will people do what they're supposed to, which is put our national security interests first? And if we do that, we all need to recognize the threat that China is. And there seems to be a bipartisan consensus in terms of, things now on Capitol Hill, the way people talk about China. But, actions are different than words. And, and we need the actions to reflect the problem, the threat that China faces. Yeah. Or presents to us.
About 18 months ago, I think Joe Biden as a candidate was in Iowa, and he said that the possibility of China eating our lunch is not going to happen. It was a come on, man kind of response. Well, earlier in the week, he changed. And in the Oval Office, He's on camera saying China's going to eat our lunch. Well, why would he make such a pivot after talking with President Xi on the phone?
Well, what I'd like to say is that when he made the comment in Iowa, he wasn't getting the benefit of, the intelligence briefings that he started to receive when he became president-elect. And like I said, that you pointed out the Wall Street Journal op-ed, and as I said in the conclusion, the intelligence is clear, and our response has to be as well. And I have to think that he and his advisors were. I don't know if surprised is the right word, but when you look at it and you look at how quickly China has closed the gap and the things that they are doing and where they are spending money, and you can't help but be concerned, about China's ability to challenge us. As I said, in certain places without, I don't want to talk about those in detail because it poses a national security threat to acknowledge that, but there are places where China's frankly doing a better job and is further down the curve on some technology issues than we are. And that's never been the case before.
I know what the readout was from the White House after that 2-hour phone call with the Chinese president. I don't know what the readout was in China or within the Communist Party, but some insiders are whispering and reporting that President Xi was aggressive. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And I think China and frankly, to a lesser extent, Iran, what I can tell you is this, Bill, is that the intelligence was also clear that, countries have preferences in terms of who they would hope would win an election. And China and Iran both, were hopeful that President Biden would be elected because the policies of the Trump administration were frankly, some would say confrontational to China and to Iran both. And I think what you're seeing in both cases, to some extent, they're now testing this administration and they're looking to see weaknesses. I mean, look what we saw, China immediately in this administration, bombers flew over Taiwan. The threats in the South China Sea became more expansive. They talked, they immediately issued sanctions against certain U.S. officials from the Trump administration, took actions against people like, Jack Ma and Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong. And, so all of those things are places to see, wait a minute, when the Trump administration and President Trump would push back or hold to account on actions that China has taken. Will the Biden administration push back? And I think that's what you're seeing with President Xi is he wants to see what he can get away with President Biden, and will there be pushback like there was in our administration?
Mm-hmm. They had mentioned Taiwan and Hong Kong and some of the reporting that I was referring to, and also the Uyghurs, the Muslims in Western China. as a defensive posture that the Chinese president took in that.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.